Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over a major Category 4 Hurricane Delta. Recently it has been updated to a Category 4 within the hour that I'm making this video. It went from a tropical storm yesterday with winds right around 45 miles per hour to a Category 4 hurricane with winds sustained of about 130 miles per hour with gusts even higher than that. We're going to be tracking this out. This could potentially become our first Category 5 hurricane of the season, and this is barreling towards parts of Louisiana, Texas, and Mississippi, and potentially Alabama and Florida, depending on the exact track of this. We're going to be going over my forecast at the end of the video, as well as my intensity forecast. So we'll go over my cone forecast and the intensity forecast, and then we'll also look at some of the model guidance and what the National Hurricane Center is showing for this storm. So before we do get into it, we'll start off with our current National Weather Service page. Red flag warnings in effect for parts of the Dakotas, Minnesota, Iowa, and even a little bit of Nebraska there. We also see for parts of Montana and Wyoming some red flag warnings also in effect. We have some air quality alerts in effect for parts of Texas, Colorado, California, and also parts of Oregon there. And other than that, there's not a lot going on. We do see those tropical storm warnings and hurricane warnings on the bottom part of your screen, so those are gonna eventually most likely make it further to the north and most likely impact parts of the central Gulf Coast. So let's get right into it here. Here is your 5-day graphical outlook. We have no systems out in the eastern 2/3 of the Atlantic, only Delta. We used to have Gamma. That one recently went down into an ex-tropical storm, so it's no longer a named storm. Now we only have Delta, which again is southwest or basically due west of Jamaica by this point, and it's also southwest of Cuba, east of Mexico and Central America. Now, here is the infrared satellite for this storm, and you can really tell how defined this storm is starting to get. You can really tell that we have a good swirl throughout this storm. You can easily tell where the storm is located, and you have a lot of convection even on the western and the southern side of the storm. So all throughout the storm, you have fairly good convection with this. So here is where the storm is located. It's currently at 18.2 degrees north by 82.7 degrees west, and it currently has maximum sustained winds of about 130 miles per hour. And this is, they actually had to make an extra update. They usually only do one on 11 a.m., 2 p.m., and then they go so on in 3-hour increments when they have a storm. They had to make a special update just 20 minutes after updating this, saying that we now have Category 4 hurricane winds with this storm. Currently has a minimum pressure of about 954 millibars, and it currently is about 125 miles southwest of Grand Cayman. Now, here is the National Hurricane Center forecast. We are expecting this to stay as a major hurricane, and then as it moves actually into just south of Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, we do have some cooler waters throughout this region, and that'll really weaken the storm. But luckily, the greatest intensification is going to be happening over the water, so hopefully we can get the storm to weaken before it does make landfall with Louisiana. Unfortunately, it will most likely make landfall with southeasternmost Mexico as a potentially Category 4 or maybe even a Category 5 if this can really rapidly intensify and continue intensifying. Now, here is your key messages for the storm. You can pause the video right here and read them if you are interested in them. Here's your current watches and warnings in the blues for western Cuba and also for a couple islands south of there. We have tropical storm warnings in effect. We also have some tropical storm watches in effect just further to the east of there. We also see tropical storm warnings and hurricane warnings in the red for parts of the Yucatan Peninsula. And then we can see the wind field with this storm, which is, it's actually a fairly small system. Given everything that we've been seeing with this, it's still a very small system, but that will actually help the storm intensify a little bit. If you look at the width of the storm, it's only about this wide, and that is practically just big enough to fit through Cuba and Mexico and to squeeze through there without really having too much impact with land or without having to move over land. So there are some scenarios where this stays all over water all the way through until it hits into parts of Louisiana and the Gulf Coast. Now, that would definitely be the worst case scenario. scenario. Luckily, right now, it is looking like it's going to move into Mexico, which might weaken a little bit before it starts to intensify again over the Gulf of Mexico. Now, here's the model track guidance with this storm, and these are all the main models, and most of them have this very tight together. They have all of the storms within, I would say, probably 25 or 50 miles of each other, all of them making impact with southeastern Mexico. But then look, it starts to really spread out. You have some models that want to make a landfall anywhere from central Louisiana to maybe even the eastern tip of Louisiana, and maybe another landfall over Mississippi and Alabama. This part of the forecast is what we really have to figure out right now. Now, here is the GEFS model, and I think this is a better representation of the spread of this storm and where this could potentially go. We have some models wanting to bring this into parts of Houston and others wanting to bring this as far east as New Orleans. So we have a lot of uncertainty with this storm, and I think that's well represented with the GFS ensemble models. But look at these shadings on these lines. This indicates how intense this storm is, and we see a lot of darker reds, especially right as it's approaching parts of Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, wherever it were to make landfall. But notice that once it starts to move closer to there, it starts to go back into those lighter reds. The orange is indicating that it's weakening a little bit. So here would be the model intensity guidance for this storm, and this is a little bit out of date because of course they just updated us with this now becoming a category 4. So right now it's already up to here, and if you look at most of these models, that would actually be on the higher end of the models. So right now what I'm looking at is probably something that would look like this, and I'll show you my actual intensity forecast at the end of the video. But I'm looking at something that looks somewhat similar to this, and then as it starts to make landfall and move into the northern Gulf of Mexico, that's when I think it'll really dive down. I think looking at the upper 25% of these models is the better indication because, again, some of these models only had this still as a lower end category 3 by this point, whereas we already have this as a category 4. So the models are definitely underplaying this, and that's something that we have to adapt to as forecasters. Now, here would be your chances of tropical storm force winds, and you see along the Louisiana coast, we have right around an 80 to 90% chance. You move a little bit more inland, and you have right around a 60 to 80% chance of that occurring. 58-mile-per-hour wind speed probability, very far south Louisiana, and also parts of the coastal areas of Louisiana. That's where you're looking at 50 to 60 mile per hour, or 50 to 60% chance of seeing 58 mile per hour winds. And then here's your hurricane forecast, or hurricane force wind speed forecast, and we're looking at right around a 30 to 40% chance as you go inland, again closer to 20 to 30%. Now here is the aircraft recon, and if you look at the top right hand portion of your screen, you do see these are the surface winds, and we're looking at surface winds that are closer to 115 knots, which is closer to category 4 strength. And then if you actually look at the graphic here, that's overlaying those observations with the satellite imagery, and we're looking at some areas at flight level between 113 knots and 137 knots, which is category 4 status. That's at flight level. So usually what you want to do is decrease that by 10%, and that would give you somewhere still around hurricane force and category 4 force. Now let's start looking at some of your sea surface temperatures and some of your environmental conditions, because this is what's going to strengthen the storm, but this is also what's going to weaken the storm later on. Look at where the storm is right now. It currently is right around here, and it's about to move into the warmest waters. So it will intensify and potentially become a higher end category 4, maybe a category 5 within the next couple of hours. But then as it starts to move into the Gulf of Mexico, look at this. We have a patch of cooler water. Here's what this looks like on the anomaly map, and we're looking at cooler than normal waters actually for the immediate Gulf Coast and the northern half and the western half of the Gulf of Mexico. So as it moves out of the Caribbean, you're going to start to get into those cooler waters, and you might be asking, why are these waters so much cooler than the Caribbean? Well, it's actually because of these very cold air masses that I've been talking about on my channel. These have been cooling down the water, so as it starts to move over to that area, it's really going to cool down. Now, I think this map represents it a little bit better. Look at the 7-day change from last week at this time, so this would be, I believe, the last day in September. Look at from the last day of September to now, how how much these sea surface temperatures have changed, and all of these sea surface temperatures, even throughout the Caribbean and over the southeast coast, and even into the Gulf of Mexico, have been lower than normal and have gone on a cooling trend. So we've been cooling down the waters recently, and that'll really help the storm weaken, and that's really a good thing. And that's pretty much the only good thing with this storm. Now, here to be the ocean heat content, and if you actually look at the Caribbean, look how much ocean heat content there is, and I'll actually do this in a different color. Look how much ocean heat content there is. This has been untapped the entire hurricane season. We have not seen, I believe we've only seen a couple systems even move through here, and we have maximum values that are exceeding the colors on this chart. So we have out of the roof, off the chart, ocean heat content, and that is really going to help this strengthen, and that is something that I'm looking at. So potentially we could see a weak or a very potentially this increasing very briefly into some sort of higher end category 4, maybe a category 5, and then I think it'll weaken after it starts to move into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, here is my forecast going from today all the way until the 10th, your 5-day forecast, and currently the storm is right around west of Jamaica by this point, and it is expected to go northwestward and then make a little bit of a curve further to the north. Now, I did keep a fairly wide cone just because we don't really know what's going to happen at this point, but I do think it'll stall out a little bit over this part of the Gulf of Mexico right around here, and then I think it'll do something like this and kind of shoot northeastward, and I think that's more likely of a track. But I didn't want to count anything out because of course it can still make a very leftward turn, kind of like this, a very broad turn, or it can make a very sharp turn, something like this, and go into parts of Alabama and Florida. Now, here's my intensity forecast, and again, this currently is a category 4. I do think it'll become a high-end category 4, and I don't want to leave out the possibility that this becomes a category 5 briefly over the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean before weakening before it makes landfall. I think when it makes landfall, probably as a category 3 or a category 2 in Louisiana, and then I think as it makes landfall, as it goes on to land, of course, it is going to weaken to maybe a tropical storm or tropical depression past that. So I hope you guys all did enjoy the video. This is going to wrap it up for today's video. I hope you guys did enjoy the video, and if you did, please consider liking the video, subscribing, and turning on notifications. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.